Kate Bush is a unique artist, from her art rock 70s beginning, through her revolutionary 80s output, to her sporadic, recluse releases. Each new album brings new ideas, new characters, and new sounds. No other artist could fit the radio-ready singles of Running Up That Hill, Hounds of Love, and Cloudbusting on the same LP as a 26-minute mini-symphony that follows a woman's death hallucinations as she drowns under ice. Her influence can be heard in the works of the Couture Twins, Tori Amos, and Björk, as well as more recent aspirants like Bat for Lashes, FKA Twigs, and Perfume Genius. But like everyone else, she had to start somewhere. And again, no other artist has entered the music world quite like Kate Bush, taking to the stage in 1978 with the haunting, classic literature-themed love song that was her debut single. This is New British Canon, and this is the story of Wuthering Heights. Born in 1958, Catherine Bush grew up in Kent, England. She took to piano from an early age and wrote prolifically throughout her teens. Early inspirations for Bush were helped along by the listening habits of her elder brothers, namely the more flamboyant and arty sides of pop music. David Bowie, Elton John, Pink Floyd, and especially Roxy Music and Brian Eno.
But love, that's one thing you really need to get by.
As further evidence of her avant-garde taste, Bush's favourite Beatles album growing up was Magical Mystery Tour. Traditional English and Irish folk music also made an impact on her, their characterizations, storytelling and sensuality bleeding into Bush's later work.
It's the sort of music my mother, who's Irish, would have listened to and danced to, and used to play for me when I was very little. It's probably my biggest musical influence. I really like that feeling folk music has, classical music too, that timeless feeling you experience from the joy of just playing.
During her early teens, a friend of the family sent a selection of her initial compositions around labels in an attempt to get her signed, but for the most part this failed. However, that tape caught the ear of Pink Floyd's David Gilmour. He arranged to have her record some professional demos with a full band at Air Studios in June 1975. This session produced 3 tracks, including the versions of The Man with the Child in His Eyes,
The Man with the Child in His Eyes,
and the saxophone song,
On Your Saxophone.
that would be used on her debut album 3 years later. While Floyd were working on Wish You Were Here at Abbey Road, Bob Mercer from their label EMI heard Bush's 3-track demo and decided to sign her. Problem was that Bush was still only 16, had never played live, and though incredibly prolific, her piano skills were rather rudimentary. Not wanting to put too much pressure on her straight away, she was put on retainer for 2 years, giving her time to refine her skills and mature as an artist. During this time, Bush finished school and moved to London. As well as constantly writing at a battered second-hand upright piano, Bush filled her days with drop-in dance and mime classes from respected artists such as Lindsay Kemp, who'd previously tutored David Bowie in giving a suitably expressive performance as Ziggy Stardust. Kemp would prove an ongoing influence on Bush, and especially her movement in her music videos. It was also around this time that Catherine left behind her childhood moniker of Kathy and started going by Kate. From the spring of 1977, she joined the 3-piece of Del Palmer, Brian Barth and Vic King to play pub gigs around the London area. They became known as the KT Bush Band. Their first show at the Rose of Lee pub in Lewisham consisted of various Motown, country and pop standards.
Come together right now over me.
Sets would later be augmented by prototype versions of James and the Cold Gun, and Them Heavy People. The group only managed 20 performances before EMI called Bush, now 18, to record her debut. Recording for Kate Bush's debut album, The Kick Inside, started in July 1977. It was produced by Andrew Powell, who'd previously composed and arranged for the Alan Parsons Project, and was a friend of David Gilmour. Through their pub circuit shows, Bush had grown creatively comfortable with the Katie Bush Band, but instead Powell enlisted a group of session musicians, namely bassist David Patton and guitarist Ian Barnston of the band Pilot.
January, sick and tired, you've been hanging on me.
As well as drummer Stuart Elliott and keyboardist Duncan McKay of Cockney Rebel.
To come up and see me, to make me smile.
Though Bush fought for her band to be on the album, being untested and unknown, she had limited bargaining power and was unsuccessful. Though other members of the Katie Bush Band would work with her on future projects, Vic King never forgave her. Aside from that unpleasantness, the album sessions went well, Bush impressing those around her with her unexpected talent, especially the stunning disconnect between the low-key sweet Kate Bush the person and the flamboyant, wild-eyed Kate Bush the artist. After we did a couple of songs, we were thinking, what's coming next? She pulls out these characters that aren't there when she's not singing or performing. There was no formula there. They were all truly original songs, and the thing that pulls it all together is her. Her shyness and unease with unfamiliar musicians was tempered by a fair amount of marijuana. Engineer John Kelly mentioning that on several occasions, her joints had to be hidden so that vocals could be recorded. At this point, she had written over 200 songs. These were pared down to 13 for the album, but the song that proved to be most essential to Bush's career was a late addition. Wuthering Heights was written past midnight within the space of a few hours in March 1977. Bush had looked to the moon and been struck with inspiration. Lyrically, it was loosely inspired by the Emily Bronte book of the same name, and in fact quotes it several times.
"Who are you?" I asked.
"Catherine Linton."
It replied shiveringly.
"I'm come home. I lost my way on the moor."
It's me, Kathy, I come home back so cold.
And a most melancholy voice sobbed,
"Let me in. Let me in."
Though at time of writing, Bush had not read it in full. The spark of the idea had come from elsewhere. She told Dennis Toohey on Tonight.
Well, I saw a series on the television about 10 years ago, and it was on very late at night, and I caught literally the last 5 minutes of the series where she was at the window trying to get in. It just really struck me. It was so strong. For years it's just been going around in my head, like the basic story and that visual image of her at the window, and I thought it was just perfect material for a song. It's just so passionate and full of impact. It's great.
Despite being born 150 years apart, Bush no doubt related to Bronte. Not only did they share a birthday, but Bush has said of her spiritual writing partner,
This young girl in an era where the female role was so inferior, and she was coming out with this passionate, heavy stuff.
this description works just as well for Bush as Bronte, where a lot of rock and roll speaks from one's own experience. For Wuthering Heights, Bush is Kathy, the ghostly apparition back from the dead to plead for forgiveness from the dark and brooding Heathcliff, her love eternal. In a way, it's an evolution of David Bowie's character work, trading a rock and roll alien for a love-struck spectre. Showing the newly written track to her producer, Powell was suitably impressed, recorded and mixed it in a frantic, overnight session to showcase to EMI. He even wrote and recorded the bass part on the track, as well as playing the Celeste, which mimics the piano introduction and pre-chorus to make it extra twinkly and dreamlike. But the track's real power comes from Bush's otherworldly vocal performance. The skyscraping falsetto, initially an experiment, with her purposely attempting to reach keys way beyond her grasp to expand her range. In the case of Wuthering Heights, she was imitating this witch, the mad lady from the Yorkshire moors, and she was very theatrical about it. She was such a mesmerizing performer. She threw her heart and soul into everything she did, that it was difficult to ever falter or say, you could do better. However, the men at EMI didn't see the track's commercial potential. Bob Mercer, who later masterminded the Now series of compilation albums, wanted to release the more archetypal rock track, James and the Cold Gun, as her debut single. Believing Wuthering Heights to be too weird sounding to be a hit. Bush, though, was adamant that Wuthering Heights needed to be her first single to get her noticed, and was a more accurate example of her as an artist.
I felt that to actually get your name anywhere, you've got to do something that is unusual, because there's so much good music around and it's all in a similar vein. It was musically, for me, one of my strongest songs. It had the high pitch and it also had a very English storyline which everyone would know because it was a classic book.
Mercer saw Kate Bush as an album artist that might, in time, gain a following. What they released as her first single wouldn't really matter long term, despite the 19-year-old artist having little say in the matter. Because she fought for it, he would let her have her way, with the logic that when Wuthering Heights inevitably failed, he would prove to her that he knew how to do his job better than she did.
And now making her debut on Top of the Pops is the exquisite Kate Bush with her new single, Wuthering Heights.
Wuthering Heights was initially going to be released in November 1977, but Bush vetoed the initial single sleeve design that focused on her cleavage a bit too prominently. As such, the release was held back until January 78. This proved lucky twofold. EMI's major December release was Wings' Mulligan Tide, which became one of the best-selling singles of all time in the UK, consuming all in its wake. As well as promotional copies of Wuthering Heights had already been sent out to radio stations. While most were happy to follow EMI's request to not play the song until its actual release, Capital Radio playlisted it, building hype for a song that listeners couldn't yet buy. The track entered the UK charts at number 41 on the 11th of February. Soon afterwards, Bush would appear on Top of the Pops for the first time. Due to musician union guidelines, as Kate Bush was a solo artist and not a band, she would have to sing along to a version of her song composed by the house orchestra.
Out of the winding, windy moors we'd roll and fall in green.
During the performance, Bush was shaky, still relatively inexperienced with playing live, and not quite gelling with this alien backing track. This began her dissatisfaction with the whole process of promotion that would define her career.
My first Top of the Pops I didn't want to do. I was terrified. I'd never done television before. Seeing the video afterwards was like watching myself die. That was when things started getting very difficult for me because until then it had all been very creative work. Writing, recording, learning to dance. But now I was talking to the press, talking to television, and I couldn't express myself easily. I was up against a different beast.
But as Wuthering Heights was rising in the charts, not everyone understood what Kate Bush was doing. And with her song inspired by a Victorian classic, her kooky interpretive dance moves, an expressive voice, so far removed from other chart fodder. Some saw her as a novelty or a joke. Worse though, because of her age, unease in expressing herself in interview, and promotional materials focusing on her sexuality, others deemed her a puppet.
People weren't even generally aware that I wrote my own songs or played the piano. The media just promoted me as a female body. It's like I've had to prove that I'm an artist in a female body.
Others compared her to the other female singer-songwriters that were successful at the time, artists that Bush could not hear in her work.
Every female you see at a piano is either Lindsay DePaul or Carole King, and most male music, not all of it, but the good stuff, really lays it on you. It really puts you against the wall, and that's what I like to do. I'd like my music to intrude. Not many females succeed with that.
But Kate Bush was definitely succeeding in making an impact on music listeners. Wuthering Heights was so thrillingly different from anything else on the radio. Bear in mind that 1978 was the year that punk was hitting the UK charts in force. But Bush was revolutionising in her own singular way, and surprisingly, Sex Pistols' Johnny Rotten loved it.
When I first heard it, I thought that was extremely challenging, the vocal. It was almost hysterical and so up there, the register. But it was absolutely fascinating, and I know at the time a lot of my friends couldn't bear it. They just thought that was just too much, but that's exactly what drew me in.
But despite vocal wobbles, snide remarks, and the press's focus on her body, her song shone through. Wuthering Heights reached #1 in the second week of March, and stayed there for 4 weeks. It was the first time a woman had topped the UK charts with a self-penned tune. And not only that, but it was a top 20 hit in 12 other countries. And because of this, counter to what the man at EMI thought, Bush was now in a lot more powerful a position. She almost supernaturally predicted her career in a way they couldn't see. This made it so that she could push The Man with the Child in His Eyes as her second single, refuse future appearances on Top of the Pops, and get the Katie Bush Band to record her follow-up album, Lionheart, at least in part. The years after would confirm to everyone that she was more than a novelty, and in fact an artist of rare genius, a national treasure of immense influence. But Wuthering Heights was her beginning, and presented her career in microcosm, where she would continue to fight for as much control of her music and image as she could, where she would be dismissed, doubted and mocked by critics, but always prove them wrong. Each album a different challenge, with new music, sounds and technology to explore. When asked in 1979 what she had left to do career-wise, Kate Bush immediately answered,
Everything. Yeah. I haven't really begun yet. I've begun on one level, but then that's all gone now, so you begin again.
Thanks for watching. Big thanks to Grace of What's So Great About That, who supplied her vocal talents on this episode. Check out her channel if you're looking for a better quality of video essay on animation, horror, video games or digital culture. I'd like to give an additional shout out to my new top tier members, Jessica Irving Hang, Kristen Cochran and Matt. Thanks a whole lot, and I'll see you soon.